past few months have been, if anything, a trial. First was reclaiming of the 4 nearby outposts of the city, so that they could once more use them as staging points for hunting and gathering of resources. Each had been lost in decades past, and all attempts to find out what happened had ended without any clues as to the nature of the threat. And thus this was the task that was the price asked in exchange for the materials and help in building a seaworthy craft for me to make the journey to find the site of my vessel's crash, and the cogcom I intended to use to secure my escape from this world. The area around each of the outposts was patrolled and defended by a foul guardian, wielding an Analar megaweapon, while having no proper or stable form that I could discern. It was only due to the fact that, despite the skill on display from the Guardians, it was clear that there was no true intelligence within them, and thus I was able to find victory, not through my skill at combat, which is not that impressive as I am a bookworm and researcher, and not a warrior, but via the absurd amount of strength and dexterity that praetors are blessed with, literally baiting a strike that would leave the weapon at rest for but the brief moment I needed to get a grip on it, and ending the fight as the Guardian tried and failed to outmuscle a being capable of playing tug-of-war with dragons. Well, some dragons at least. That is when I discovered they would simply fade once defeated, only to be reborn come the next dusk or dawn. Besides confirming the lack of a true mind, as the exact same trick to defeat them worked each time. It delayed things for weeks without much, if any, gain. Only via research and experimentation of a vast degree, and finally the assistance of another of this planet's residents, Unka, was a means of ending the threat found. Using the odd crystal I had picked up during the hunter's exam, I was able to trap the essence and energy of each of the Guardians after defeating them. This allowed for the reclamation of the outposts, and saw me praised as a great hero, with me not sharing details about the assistance of Onka. This was by his own request, as the people of the town were unaware of him, and he wished for his privacy, as he was an outsider to them as much as I was. By the 9 and 4, welcome once more to the library. Today, we're going to take a brief look at one of the products of the War of Feather and Scale, a set of weapons developed for one reason alone: to slay dragons. I am the recorder, and of course I am speaking of the mega weapons of the Analar. I do hope you enjoy this look into their nature and history. As you are well aware, my perceptive patrons, this shall be but a brief look into these tools of Analar warfare. As stated, the mega weapons are a product of the wars between Analar and Dragon, and they had one aim, being the most effective means of slaying the much larger dragons. They were developed by the members of the High House of the Analar, Lun, by disciples of the great and mighty Four themselves, and proved perfectly able to fit the requirements set forth. Along with the training and styles also created, these weapons proved so effective that the Analar were able to face the dragons in open combat, with the terms being far less one-sided, if not dead even. Key to this is the various metaphysical components within a mega weapon. These allow the weapon to be wielded in a way that seems to defy the laws of physics in how the weapon might see its momentum redirected mid-swing or during a strike, creating an area of effect for each swing or strike that is not only much larger than the already massively oversized weapon, but delivers an even amount of force in that area that proves only deadlier the larger a foe is, as more of the strike's effect is channeled into them by virtue of their size within the area of effect. Secondly, I had been patrolling near the last of the outposts when I came across the being that had been responsible for the creation of the Guardians. Nearly 15 feet in height and wearing sleek armor, I understood before I attacked that I was not walking away from this battle, for it was an Antani Eskai, and a Colossi at that. A standard Gigai would have been a handful for me to fight, but the Eskai were mostly unknown, and the little that is known made it clear I was going to be outmatched. Despite the fact that as a Praetor, I was literally engineered to be one of the strongest, fastest, and most agile creatures within the realms. The disparity between our skill and combat ability was far too vast, even for the effects of my spells, prayers, and powers to make up the difference. The battle lasted for perhaps as long as 5 or 10 minutes before the Antani chose to end his toying with me by laying me low with a burst of its arm-mounted cannon. I fell into darkness as he slowly approached my wounded form, speaking as to how much greater he would become after feasting on my soul and essence. I found myself awakening some time later, under the care of Unka, as Trenos had fled the battle to find help, and brought him to my nearly dead form. It had been almost 3 more weeks before I was able to properly get up, or stay awake for more than a few minutes. In that time, Trinos had been acting as a messenger to keep the residents of the city informed that I had not abandoned our agreements, but had been otherwise delayed in securing the northern reaches, which, for all its bluster, was not a lie. That Antane would have laid the entirety of the town to waste if it had been able to find it. It appears that the nature of this jungle of ore woods and ore vines must have some sort of disorienting effect on Antani. as it was clear from examination of the area around the battle and the corpse of the now headless and dead creature that it had been wandering in roughly a mile or so area for many years at the least. It was during the examination of the corpse, whom I was already being credited for slaying, despite not knowing exactly how I had managed it, that something happened. Onka said he had found me with my weapon in hand, barely alive, with the beast as he was when we returned, headless and on his knees, arms behind him holding him up. The armor he had worn fallen loosely around him. It was then, on our return, that my cloak and armor, the gifts Unka crafted from both my own damaged oilcloth cloak and the armor of the fallen foe we now looked on, came to life, and I became a passenger in my own body, seeing myself draw the staff Onka had crafted for me, and began laying into the corpse in precise motions, watching in awe as the body became dust under the blows. Eventually, 4 motes of light drifted free from the body, and before fading, flashed with a warm, grateful brilliance. Again I fell to blackness after this, as while I was mostly recovered, it had still been too much for my still weakened state. There are 5 commonly known forms of megaweapons. The sword form known as a cloud cleaver, the axe-like form known as a scale slicer, the spear form of a planet piercer, the great hammer known as a mountain sledge, and finally, rarest of all, the staff form of a sky pillar. Each weapon has its own attacks and forms, from the mountain sledge's massive shock waves to the cones of death dealt out by a cloud cleaver. And while a master of one weapon could use the abilities, strikes, and motions of another weapon, only a sky pillar can do so without extensive retraining, as that was part of its design and explains the rarity for its use. For only a few can master the focus required to manage the forces within the staff to allow for such flexibility. Common across all the mega weapons is the fact that they were designed, as were the styles required to release their potential, for flying wielders. Thus, any who lack the ability to dance in the air and allow the vast size of the weapon to have the range of motion it requires will find themselves quite slowed and hampered as the ground itself becomes an obstruction. Many who choose to pursue the use of a mega weapon will find that acquiring one is as troublesome, if not more so, than finding a teacher. This time I slept only a few hours, as the effects of the exchange had been made clear to me in my slumber. Along with the cloak and armor, Onka had also incorporated the crystal containing the guardians, and as I had suspected, they had been the martial skill and prowess of the 4 Analar that had served as hidden protectors of these people, while the Antani integrated the minds and souls for himself. When I freed the souls to their afterlife, they chose to impart just a fraction of their mind and will to allow the skills now contained within my attire to teach and train me in the art of the mega weapons, just as they had led Onka in the creation of my staff, via his ability to attune to the crystal and skill to glean the guidance needed for the work. The staff was one that could be shifted from a storage form, perhaps the size of a scroll case or baton, to an 8-foot staff, with one end designed for metaphysical defense and the other offense, and finally into the form of a sky pillar, the rarest of mega weapons commonly known to exist. Only members of House Alon know the secrets of crafting the mega weapons, and they do so slowly. However, with the vast degree of use they saw in the wars, there are many that were lost during that conflict, only to be rediscovered in the later ages. Often, these can be found as parts, or in some cases entire, monuments or other architectural works. With the resurgence of the NLR in the modern ages, the demand and thus cost for one of these found relics is on the rise, making the recovery of any of these weapons an industry all on its own. Now seeing use by not only the NLR, but with some regularity the Dragwa as well as Crystons that augment themselves with the gift of flight, the sight of a mega weapon is becoming more common outside of the arenas, where they always drew great crowds for the sheer displays they were capable of. With this brief explanation and overview of the mega weapons of the NLR at its end, I want to thank you once more, my perceptive patrons, as always, for your time and your interest. Thank you. I am, as always, the Recorder, and until you next make your way back to the library for another entry, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. I would be able to enter a dreamlike state for this training by meditating with the cloak completely closed around me, hood drawn over my face, and in but 2 hours experience and feel the effects of nearly a day of training. While aware I was not truly becoming any greater of a warrior, I was expanding my skills and learning the forms and techniques of the mega weapons, at least the basic ones. By the time Trinos had brought messages from the city that the elders wished to see me as soon as possible, I was proficient in the basic forms and strikes for each mega weapon, as well as how to execute them with my sky pillar. This training had been matched and complemented by more studies into the texts and tomes that had been not only found by Onka during his time on this world, but that were in each of the outposts. Onka, turned out, was very adept and learned in the arts of magic, with a bent towards creation and artifice, and was a most enlightening mind to discuss various details of the craft with. Our combined skills went into the last of the enchantments laid on my new gear, with the boots receiving particular enchantments to allow me to manifest resistive force on the soles as needed to allow me to manage and control myself while I levitated, and would also allow me to properly wield the sky pillar, as it was, just like all the mega weapons are, intended for combat in the skies. with the events of the past few months, and the revelation that Antani are present on this world, I am choosing to change priorities, and will seek to further explore and seek out any other of these foul creatures. As so far I can tell, the people of this city are a new people, and in need of protection from threats that they have no defense against. Hopefully, the elders of the city can be convinced of the severity of the danger once I get there and converse with them.